If you haven't seen already, Corsair Gaming missed their earnings and revenue for the second quarter of 2021. The share price dropped by 7% immediately, even though Corsair missed its EPS by just 8% and its revenue by only 0.5%. It has started to rise again slowly, and obviously everyone is now wondering what exactly can we expect from Corsair Gaming. In this video, I will break down and comment on Corsair Gaming's recent earnings, full year outlook and price. If you want to learn more, stick around and smash that like button to help out the channel. It's obvious that Corsair Gaming missed both revenue and earnings estimates, but at least they did keep their outlook for 2021 unchanged. Let's first look at their financials. We will compare them with the same period last year to avoid any discrepancies due to seasonality. In terms of revenue, Corsair Gaming saw a 24.3% growth to $472.9 million, with most of it coming from their gamer and creator peripherals sector. That revenue increased by a whopping 41% to $155.2 million, while the gaming components and systems segment only increased by 17.6% to $317.7 million. One reason behind that was the shortage of semiconductors, which everyone knows about. However, more importantly for Corsair Gaming, there was a big shortage of high-end CPUs and graphics cards, which really affected their ability to sell high-end gaming PCs. Corsair Gaming's CFO shared that they have a lot of customers waiting for these components to become available, so we could see a bump in sales during the next quarter. Other flagship products were also affected and were out of stock for a long time. Keyboards, high-end headsets. Obviously, that also resulted in lower sales. Plus, historically, the second quarter of the year tends to be the weakest for Corsair Gaming in terms of revenue, with the fourth typically being the strongest. You know, Black Friday, Christmas, it's a good quarter for a lot of hardware companies. Plus, Corsair Gaming maintained their focus on increasing their product range, which will also continue to boost revenue. Looking at profits, Corsair Gaming's gross margin remained flat at 27.6%. However, even though their gross profit increased by 24% as compared to last year, their operating profit dropped. One look at their financial statements tells us that their sales, general and admin expenses went up by a lot and essentially offset the jump in the profit. It looks like a big chunk, about $4.5 million or 5%, was stock-based compensation, which is most likely the result of the jump in their share price or their revenue. A lot of companies have these stock incentives where they reward staff for good performance or their executives or CEOs for the jump in price. The good thing is that stock incentives are not actually cash expenses, even though they are recorded on the income statement. Essentially, Corsair Gaming does not spend any cash on these. High stock incentives are typical for companies with recent IPOs or growing companies in general. When we compare Corsair Gaming's operating expenses to the same quarter last year, these increased by 41%. The main reasons behind that, according to Corsair Gaming's CFO Michael Potter, was increased shipping costs, more expenses due to Corsair Gaming now being a public company, and also an increase in personnel costs due to the growing number of products. He expects that operating expenses will continue to rise as the company grows, but that should be offset by improving the gross margins. In terms of net earnings, their target net margins are in the low to mid-teens, so essentially between 10 and 15%. Currently, they are much lower. This quarter, the second quarter of 2021, their net margin is only 5.8%. Corsair Gaming's GAAP EPS was $0.28 for the second quarter of 2021, and their non-GAAP EPS was $0.36. Corsair Gaming's net earnings were $27.7 million, up from $22.6 million last year, so a 22% increase. Their adjusted net earnings were $35.7 million, up from $32.3 million over the same period last year, so again a 10.5% increase, which is lower but it's still good. Overall, net earnings are rising fast, but we can expect to see a lot of improvement over the next few quarters. One of the drivers behind higher margins is the increased demand for peripherals that we saw. As a segment, they are higher margin than the gaming components and systems segment, with a gross margin of 35.2% versus 23.8% as of the second quarter of 2021. Growing the peripherals segment should result in better overall margins, so it's good to see that there is increased demand. Before I move on to the outlook, I want to say that Corsair Gaming also managed to pay down some debt. Looking at the financial statements, we can see that their interest expense was only half of what it was last year, $4.5 million in Q2 of 2021 versus $9.6 million in Q2 of 2020. Corsair Gaming said that they are continuing to pay down their debt and expect only $4 million worth of interest expenses for the coming quarters. Personally, I like the fact that they are keeping their finances under control. One of the main reasons why fast-growing companies fail is due to aggressive over-expansion while having poor financial health. That's not going to happen with Corsair Gaming, which is really good to see. Alright, so the outlook. Corsair Gaming have said that their guidance for 2021 remains unchanged. They expect between 1.9 and 2.1 million in revenue, adjusted operating income of $235 million and $255 million, and adjusted EBITDA of $245 and $265 million. In 2020, Corsair Gaming's revenue was only 1.7 million, so that would show an increase of between 12 and 23.5% in revenue. Corsair Gaming's adjusted EBITDA was 213 million in 2020, so their guidance shows a possible increase of between 15 and 24.5%, which is great to see. Personally, I also want to see this reflected in their net income. But as I said, I think stock compensation and a couple of other factors can affect this. In terms of things to watch, it looks like the semiconductor shortage and shipping costs are at the top of the list. The sooner these issues go away, the sooner Corsair Gaming will see a jump in net income. Finally, how did the markets react to these news? Well, Corsair Gaming dropped by 7% to $26.6, just like I said in my previous video. Personally, I think that was a bit undeserved, but it just offers a good buy opportunity. Corsair Gaming just became even cheaper. Right now, their price is $27.4, their PE using their adjusted EPS is 13.5, and their forward PE is also 13.5. Price to sales is 1.3, price to book is 5.1. I mean, some telecom stocks trade at a similar valuation and they're pretty much hopeless in terms of growth. Corsair Gaming has not traded this low since November. Looking at the chart, it looks like there is a strong support at around $26, and I think that we can rely on it. The next one is at around $22.5. In terms of resistance, the most immediate level is between $30 and $32, then $34.5 to $35.5, and after that we're looking at $40. I think that investors just want to see that Corsair Gaming is no longer facing any issues with growth. As soon as the semiconductor and GPU shortages are removed, as soon as shipping prices normalize, we can expect to see a jump in price. However, for the time being, Corsair Gaming is in an obviously bearish trend. I think we are getting to the point where the company is simply too cheap, but we need a strong catalyst, maybe some good news to get investors excited. Until then, I think that there is nothing else to do apart from waiting and dollar cost averaging. That's not a financial advice, that's just what my plan is. Don't forget to do your own research. I hope you find this useful. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and comment. Thank you for watching and I will talk to you again soon.